think I'm ready. I said, I think I'm ready. And Brett's like, yeah.
Boom. 20 seconds.
You're going. It wasn't 20 seconds. I was like, I think I'm ready. You're like, go. Welcome to Straight Red Card. And this is the big deep dive show about MLS NEXT Pro.
Yeah.
And what they're not telling you about it, honestly, and why it really happened and what the details are going through and why it was there has both positives and negatives. Because there are some positives too. I did that deep dive, Brett.
Yep.
And I think there are positives too.
There's definitely some things I like about it.
Yeah. And but before we get into that, it was really interesting this weekend. I was with not my band, but guys that have played in my band before, and they have their own band. And we were in Brown County in this cabin they rented. And I came over and to record some backup vocals and a lead on one of their songs. I think they're called the Pink Eagles. So look for that. It's good stuff. Very good stuff. And we got into this big argument about Ralph Waldo Emerson's transparent eyeball and exactly what that meant. It was just a crazy discussion. It was a crazy discussion between four extremely stoned people. And I wish I could relate it here, but if you haven't read about Emerson's transparent eyeball, please do catch that out. Because
I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. I'm usually pretty good at vamping off these random stories, but this one
you're just fucked on this one.
Yeah, let's let Derek run through. Let's get the MLS NEXT Pro, please.
You're not an English lit major, right?
Soccer start. Here's the timestamp for right now. Okay.
All right. We'll move on then.
Introduction to Buddy Jesus. I mean, come on.
Well, Jesus was certainly. Well, I know. I'm not going to say anything about Jesus. Buddy. We saw what happened with John Lennon when he said, "We're as big as Jesus." Well, where did that get him? So, not saying that. Not that I was going to say that, but you just don't talk about Jesus. That's just not on YouTube. Probably not a good thing. Unless you're like a preacher and that's your whole jig, then go for it. Okay, so we're talking about this whole MLS NEXT Pro deeper. This is their deeper dive on that. And what's going to happen is there's going to be, for starters, 21 teams in this league.
Playing 24 games starting about late March.
And so let's start with the positives of that.
Sure.
The positives of that is prior to this in the USL, there were only 16 MLS teams that currently run any sort of reserve team or have an affiliate or an affiliate relationship. So we're moving from 16 to 21 immediately, and that's good. But critics, Brett, will say, okay, that's good, I guess. I don't even know if they'd say that, but it does seem like MLS is going to monopolize on all of the best talent now because the academies are going to become more prolific and they're going to suck up all the good players and they're not going to go to USL. So essentially this is killing USL, but I disagree with that. And I think you would too, right? Because if you are Jonathan Gomez and you don't want to sign a contract with MLS because those are long and binding, you're going to say, fuck it, I'm going to go play for Louisville, right? In USL. And
well, I mean, nothing's changed. I mean, there was always an academy team with the clubs. Then there are the 16 teams, I think is what you said, that were part of USL / affiliates, I guess. They were already there. So nothing's changing except
there's +5.
Well, no, the numbers are changing, yes. But the fact that the MLS teams already had more or less a second team, not all teams, obviously, like we had just mentioned multiple times now. But nothing's changing. All they're doing is they're moving away from USL. USL's still there. MLS 2 teams are still there, but they're just in separate divisions now.
And then by 2023, Atlanta, DC, LAFC, LAG, Nashville, and
basically everybody besides Montreal will be in by 2023. I have no idea where Montreal's at.
Yeah,
For
they're
whatever
playing,
reason, they're not listed. Nobody's even talked about them. I don't even know if they're a team at this point.
they're playing with their peckers. They're too busy playing with their peckers. So I don't know what's going on at Montreal. I mean, this is the great thing about this is it actually forces Houston to do something.
Yeah.
Anything at all. So that's the positive, right? Like we're going to move from 21 and eventually they're going to add another 6 or 7 and we're going to get to 27. That's every team or almost every team because I think the Rochester Rhinos they're not going to call themselves the Rhinos anymore, which sucks. But they're
I
kind
don't see
of
why they would change it. But
well, they're going to be co-owned by Jamie Vardy, which is kind of cool. But they'll be one of the few or the only non MLS 2 teams
for
in
right
the
now,
league.
right now, there's talks of having including more in the end.
Yeah, and then someone was saying, well, is this MLS's long-term goal for building promotion relegation, MLS 1, MLS 2? I don't think so.
No.
Because these are 2 teams. 2 teams in Europe, even in Germany, aren't allowed to play in the first division.
Well, yeah,
so that's not going to happen.
Consider the randomness that say like Chicago gets relegated, but Chicago 2 gets promoted.
I was going to say the same
That'd
thing.
be the weirdest thing in the world. All of a sudden, like, okay, we're just going to flip flop rosters. Cool.
So yeah, like Houston gets relegated in MLS, but their 2 team comes in first in the development league. No, this is not any movement towards pro reg.
If this is a movement towards pro reg or relegation, then they're looking incredibly far down the road because they're not going to start implementing promotion relegation with only a handful of non-MLS teams within this league. So this is MLS's take on it. This is not a reserve league. This is a developmental league between the academy level and the senior level.
That's kind of bullshit though.
So the idea is you're going to have, I think it was at least 13 signed players, and you can have no more than 23 and older players on the game day roster. So the idea is you're really focusing on those 22 and unders.
What idiot MLS team would waste playing a 29-year-old in the MLS in the reserve team unless they're coming off injury?
That's the only reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's gonna be that gap, that stopgap between academy and not getting any playing time with the first team, basically.
I mean, here's the thing that bites me in the ass, Brett, and irritates me. All right. And it's a guy like Mark Abbott, who's the deputy commissioner of MLS, coming out and saying, this will complete the professional pathway between academies and MLS first teams. That is just an annoying generalization. It's not like that wasn't already happening. Don't pretend it wasn't already happening. There was already a bridge for that to happen. So don't pretend this is like a fucking, you're building a goddamn, the Brooklyn Bridge to get them from one part of New York City to the other. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear really why you decided this was necessary at this point. And really, the honest truth is that this forces, there are 2 things here. It forces other MLS teams that don't have a reserve team to start one, because that's, I guess, in the bylaws at this point. You have to start one soon.
That could have been forced at the USL level, though. I don't think that's a non-talking point, because there's no reason MLS couldn't just come out and say, hey, by 2023, every MLS team has to have a USL team set up and established and playing. Except
for there are only, I believe, a handful of teams playing, MLS 2 teams playing in USL, and they were failing, by the way. They weren't doing very well. And I don't think they were making that kind of investment. Where the fuck was I going with this?
so yeah, the reasons why. I mean, if you're saying that it forces MLS teams to create that second team, but again, they could have done that. They could have had them in USL, and the big thing, the big reason why there's the split, because there had been a mutual split, if you will.
It was the $5 million, Brett.
Oh no, yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, so we talked about it in the previous episode where I got a lot of this information from a website called Sounder at Heart, sounder@heart.com.
Right. Yeah.
And he had talked about how there was a split growing within the circles of USL, basically stating that MLS is starting to wear out their welcome. Talked about how all USL teams who were all the expansion teams were paying $10 million into the league. MLS 2 teams did not pay any of that. You had brought up last week, I think it was, that they were asking MLS teams to pay the $5 million.
And then they were asking for the other teams that aren't in yet, who wanted to build reserve teams in MLS, because there were plenty of them that weren't in yet, who wanted to come in. They were saying, you need to pay $10 million to come into. And they're like, what the fuck? You know, all the other MLS teams got in for free. Why don't we get in for free? Oh, well, you're going to make them pay a $5 million back fee. Okay. And that's why this all happened. That's why it all fell apart, right?
Yeah. And to the point you were making earlier about how there were, I don't know how many actual MLS 2 teams there were. And you mentioned 16 MLS 2 plus affiliates. But the number, whatever the number was, only like 2 of them had made the playoffs in the last couple seasons.
Yeah.
So they weren't very competitive in that sense, because MLS they weren't necessarily using those teams to be competitive. Again, they're trying to use those teams to develop players to move them forward into the seniors. And USL league was probably looking at that going, this is bullshit. If you're not going to actually come out and try to put forth a quality product, because that's what we want. We want a quality product on the field. Then, you know, this shit's getting tiring, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right. Because see what happens. You got Atlanta 2, DC Loudon, right? Loudon.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the Red Bulls, RSL, Seattle, and the Monarchs.
Yep.
And those
Kansas
are
City.
Those are the direct. Yeah, those are direct. But I mean, people would be shocked if they found out there were only 6 or 7 MLS 2 teams in USL.
LA had, or Galaxy had theirs. I think, quite frankly, I think the Galaxy utilized their reserve, the MLS 2 team I guess New York was probably up there with that too, but used it the best. I mean, they actually promoted quite a few players through the system. They
did, but then we look at the results from this past season, and one of the complaints by USL was nobody comes to the 2 teams games, right? Yeah. That's one issue. They even talk about it when they're mentioning the MLS NEXT Pro. They're like, we're not expecting a lot of attendance for these games, blah blah blah. You know, so I mean,
nothing's going to change.
Eventually, I mean, the word is that like this is going to make things better for MLS 2 teams. We're going to really promote this. We're going to get it online. We're going to get streaming. People are going to go. They're going to go support this. That's what Abbott said in the interview. He's like, yeah, this is a big move up for us. We're going to promote this league. And okay, that's fine. And then, yeah, USL was complaining that the quality of the 2 teams was falling behind recently. And he's right. There are 8 teams in each conference generally. And the Red Bulls 2 team finished 7th. Loudon finished 8th in the East. In the West, Atlanta, not the West, the Southwest. Atlanta finished Southeast. 7th. SKC 2 finished 8th. And then in Pacific, LAG 2 finished 6th. So
didn't the Sounders have a team? I thought the Sounders had a team too. Maybe not. Maybe they just had an affiliate.
Well, there's some teams in League 1 too. We got Dallas, Inter.
Oh yeah. I forgot.
Revs,
yeah, exactly.
Toronto. Yeah, you got a bunch of teams down. But as far as teams that made the playoffs, not a lot of MLS 2 teams did. But that's the whole point that we made before, which is so these young kids are playing against grown men on these other USL teams, and that is real competition. And now they're all going to be playing in what is essentially been gilded as a Division 3, and
to an extent there, it's kind of short-sighted for USL to immediately just jump and say, hey, pay us the money or get out, because I mean, most of these rosters, they had 22, 23 players on them or more, give or take. And guess what? A couple of those players are going to crack the first team, at any given year. Guess what? Where the most of those players are going to end up going? They're either going to continue playing with the two teams that they're already on, or they're going to get transferred. It's going to end up growing the depth of all the other teams in the league. So I don't know. And that could still happen, quite frankly, but
you can see when you watch like Axel Schuster, who's the sporting director from the Whitecaps, in his interview, you can kind of see like there's a monologue that's already been written for them, because they all say the same
Here's
thing.
your script.
Right, because he said, well,
Tote that company line, bitch.
Look how well, two teams, U23, two teams do in Germany. Hey, dummy, you know this. Two teams in Germany don't play in a 2 league. They play in two Bundesliga, 3 Bundesliga, or regional Liga. Mm-hmm. They're all playing against grown men, and they're learning, and they're getting there's a lot of competition there, and that makes those players better. Like the example that Abbott brought up with the English U23 league is laughable. U23 leagues are just where English teams hide players that they don't want to sign yet. And they don't have to. They can just like tuck them until they're like 22, 23 in the U20. Look at Arsenal. Like, how many young players have been so touted in their youth, academy up through their Arsenal U23 team that never make it, because they just get tucked away and get stuck at 20, 21, 22, 23, stuck at Arsenal U23s. And by then it's over, folks, because they've just been playing other boys the same age. And that's not going to make them any better. You got to actually, at some point, if you're Dortmund or there are other teams in Germany who will do this, are like, no, we're just going to bring this 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid up. We're going to start playing them. That doesn't happen in England. So to Abbott on that one, he failed on that response completely. I don't know.
Does NISA require any form of expansion fee? I don't think they do they?
No, they're begging for people to crawl up and join.
Here's the big question, I guess, because you're still looking at an adult league there. Why not just, instead of starting your own? I guess maybe they're looking at potentially.
Oh, I looked it up. It's $500.
Oh, can't afford that. No, but I mean, there's already a league established. It doesn't cost much of anything, if anything, actually, to get into it. And you can just you just say, hey, every MLS team needs to have a 2 team. They need to have, and again, don't want to call it a reserve team. I don't give a rat's ass. Call it 2 team.
Well, and that's
have a 2 team, and you can still be playing against men. Now, mind you, it's third division, and quite frankly, the difference between USL and NISA, I don't know if there's a huge, massive amount of difference. I mean, you're still playing against guys that are probably moving around between the leagues.
You can just call it NISA. NISA. But here's the weird thing about that. Like, so the MLS, this whole new MLS Next Pro League is talking about adding all these other teams from all these other cities. Like, yeah, there'll be MLS 2 teams there, but it's going to be loaded eventually. So what? That's competition against NISA. That's going to be competition eventually against USL. There aren't, how many more cities are left that don't have, like, legit cities that don't have at least a team in USL or NISA or League One in USL? I mean, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. So are you going to be, launching MLS 2 teams in their neighborhood eventually? I think so. And I think that's kind of like the crooked way of looking at this. Like MLS, this is like the beginning of the plot, right? They're saying, oh, yeah, Abbott's saying we have this great relationship with USL, and I think that's going to continue. What relationship? You're totally getting out. There's not going to be a relationship unless you have, I don't know, MLS teams that don't want to play one of their 18-year-olds at their reserve team and decide to loan them out.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, this relationship is done. So don't fucking lie to us. And that's what Abbott did. He lied. And it's something we're used to, by the way. So
sure.
it's
you must always get half truths, and at that point, you just sort of have to piece it together. But it'll be interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You finish that thought.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, if I would call MLS the most inauthentic repliers to questions and presenters of information. I mean, you look at the video. Have you watched the video they put out for this whole MLS
It doesn't really tell you much of anything, does it?
It is the most inauthentic horseshit I have ever watched. It is puke worthy. It is so fabricated. Like this kid, they show him at like 5 years old kicking a ball around the soccer field. Suddenly he's 16 or 15 or whatever he is. And then boom, he gets a call from Don Garber and he gets signed to MLS. What the? They're developing a pathway. This is just ridiculous. Complete the professional pathway. This is gibberish between academies and MLS first teams. This is all gibberish, Brett. You know it. I know it. This whole pathway thing. They posted a whole thing about the ecosystem, the MLS ecosystem. What the quit? I mean, this is a way of obfuscating. This is a way of not answering questions. This is a way of keeping it as cloudy as possible and getting away with it by using generic fucking big words. That's it. That's all this is. They should come out and quit being total runts and tell us the real truth of what went on, why they made the decision for reals. But they're not going to do that. They're not going to do it. So why am I getting up? Why am I?
You're never going to get all the information.
I'm just sick of the inauthentic discussions we have when we have to talk about the U.S. men's national team or MLS. There's so much inauthenticity with those two particular groups. Like it's all a show. It's like a fucking,
they hold hands and they wave at the same time.
It's a show, but none of it's real. Just be real. People will respect you. Like if you just stood up and told it how it was. There doesn't need to be a show behind the curtains. We don't need a Wizard of Oz. What we really need is you just tell us what really is going on. Be honest with us. That's all we ask for. When you use this kind of language, pathway, all right, I'm not buying it. Ecosystem. I think you're full of shit. That's the first thing I think of. Those are not words that like people use on an everyday basis. Unless you work in corporate America. This is ridiculous. Talk to people who are fans. Quit bullshitting us. This is crap. I'm done. It's phony baloney, as they used to say back in the 50s.
I mean, it would have just been as easy to come out and say, hey, we mutually split with USL. We want to focus on developing players, getting them ready for to make the leap up into the first team, possibly looking to sell, because that's some of the talking points that that people have mentioned, how we've actively becoming more of a selling league in the end, which is funny because at the beginning of it all, they're like, no, we're not going to sell people, blah, blah, blah.
You know what? They didn't even have to be that specific. They could have said, listen, we sat down, we just had a different vision, and, we're just going to go our separate ways. That would be honest. Not this, oh, yeah, we're still sucking each other's dicks 69, 24/7. We're best buddies. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not best buddies.
You kind of brought this up as far as like that. How many cities are there left that you can really start, bring in expansion teams for all these different divisions, all these different leagues. And I was thinking, is like, how many of the MLS 2 teams will actually be housed in the MLS or wherever the first team plays?
Right.
I mean, you look at. I'll use Seattle as an example. I know I had mentioned I thought Seattle 2 had a team, and they do. It's Tacoma Defiance.
It's Tacoma,
So
and they're going to be
yeah.
They're going to be leaving. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the idea of that maybe some of these teams won't necessarily play in the same market because maybe they want to expand their market reach, which is something that I know Chicago, that'd be a reasonable thing. You look at Milwaukee, you look at South Bend, you look at even Fort Wayne. I know Fort Wayne has a USL 1 team, I think. Maybe in ISA? One of the two?
It's League 1 or League 2, I believe.
So, but I'm just like, all of a sudden, while you're not necessarily when you're shaking hands with USL and say, "Oh, we're not going to be competing with them," but all of a sudden you throw a team in more or less their backyard. I mean, I know for a fact. I mean, we both know for a fact there's a large contingent of Fort Wayne fans that make it in the 11 games.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you throw in another professional team. Although Fort Wayne's a bad example since they already have technically a professional team there. But you throw somebody in that's literally an hour and a half north of where Indy 11 play. And you're going to be siphoning potential fans that are going to be making the trip over because all of a sudden you have a team there. Why would you make an hour and a half trip south when you have a team in your backyard?
And when we look at all the affiliates and we look at all the affiliate relationships that could turn and teams that are owned by MLS teams and 2 teams that play in USL, we are looking at USL dropping something from like 31 teams to 18 teams by 2023, unless they sign up new teams.
They had mentioned how they have a number of new teams ready to roll consistently.
Listen, dude, we heard that all the time when we were involved with the whole development.
Same thing happened at NASL. Yep.
Yes. I used to talk to the commissioner of the NASL and he'd be like, "Hey, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on that.
We got 10 teams over the next 3 years."
And he's like, "Hey, thanks for all your help and all, what you did in Indy, blah, blah, blah. Here's what we're working on going forward." It was really cool. I think you got to take the trip to the USL
supporter group thing.
Yeah. And I'm sure they were fucking barking there like, there are more teams to come. But
I walked into that meeting all decked down in a nice suit and vest and everything like that, and everybody there was wearing t-shirts. And I was like, "That's right. Hot as hell because it's fucking ATL, but I'm a professional."
You could have dropped that vest for sure.
No, the vest was the coolest part. Well, I'm just gonna keep rocking that. I'll take the undershirt off and just wear a vest.
I mean, yeah, that's sexy and all. But probably
Dimitri Martin has a joke where he's like, a leather vest, not cool, but a leather jacket is cool. So I've figured out what makes it cool is leather sleeves.
I think the big difference actually is that a leather one makes you one thing and the other thing makes you like a flying Wanda brother or whatever. Those guys used to do that with the stick on the line across from one building to the next, and they would try to cross over thousands of
tightrope walking.
Yeah. I don't remember what their names were, but they used to wear those funky vests in their little gigs. All right. And then go ahead.
I was just say, just a quick recap. If you're all still with us at this point, I know we're about like 5 hours into this video, but if you're still in with us, we see a lot of good with this league, I guess.
Yeah, because once you get every single MLS team committed to having an MLS 2 team, that's a lot of fucking academy players who are 18, 17, 16 years old who are going to get a chance to play on that reserve team.
And like we mentioned earlier, I mean, once you get over 23 years old, you're either making that first team or you're back to USL. Back to it, but you're going to go to USL.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing Abbott said, and it'll give older players a chance too. Yeah, 3 of them.
Fuck that, yeah.
2 of them.
And nobody's going to play them. Like you said, unless they're recovering from an injury there's no chance that they're going to sign somebody over 23 or send somebody down from the first team. It's not going to happen.
So they get 3 spots. They'll sign one guy who's older to mentor, and the other 2 will be left open for guys who get injured on the actual real first team who are going to need those spots to get healthy again and get some time. So that's bullshit. More bullshit from Abbott and MLS.
But I mean, on top of that, we also see some negatives behind the league itself. The idea that we went from having these 18 to 22-year-old kids playing against a bunch of men to playing a bunch of 18 to 22 kids, I think that's a negative. I think that's going to hamper our development. I think going in and battling with guys, 6 to 10 years older than you, I think that's a great learning curve to endure.
Yeah, so it's their pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
It's like that girlfriend you had who wanted to have sex with you, but she also wanted to piss in your mouth. So it's,
Thank goodness is at the end of the show.
You're like, well, yeah, but I don't really want you to piss on me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Is that acceptable? I think we can say that on YouTube.
Sure.
I mean, I've lived a crazy lifestyle. So, okay. Make sure you like, subscribe, share it with your Uncle Umbro. If you have one, that's a soccer ball, actually. And and until the next time on the Straight Red Card, we have another segment. Amazingly, it's gonna go really poorly for me. Good night.